Warning lights flashed, and sirens wailed in a pulsating rhythm, bringing life to the sleepy compound and making shadows dance across the gray cement hallways. "What is it, Private Card?" General McDowell asked with a yawn, straightening his cap on his gray-flecked brown hair as he entered the control room and walked up to the tall soldier with the blonde crew cut. Turning his pale green eyes from the control panel to look at his commanding officer, he saluted and replied, "It's Experiment 93, sir. It's escaped its containment." "What? How in the world did that happen? That thing had multiple safeguards to ensure that it couldn't escape." "We don't know, sir. They all disengaged simultaneously." "How is that even possible?" General McDowell asked, half to himself, his light blue eyes becoming troubled and his voice becoming agitated. "A third of the locks are manual, and a third run on a closed circuit." "I don't know, sir. I'm pulling up the video file now." Private Card waited while the general and a few other soldiers, who had just come through the door, watched the images that had dumbfounded Card only minutes before. The screen showed a, seemingly still, panoramic image of a concrete hallway lined with doors. Each door had a keypad and a number of scanners and locks on it. On each door, multiple metal rods went deep into the wall, held in place by multiple mechanisms, which secured the door to what seemed a downright excessive degree, no matter what was inside. Suddenly, there was a number of flashes, beeps, and clicks as the locks on one of the doors all disengaged in rapid succession. The door swung open seemingly of its own accord, and a disheveled figure in an entirely undone straitjacket and white pants walked out and made its way purposefully down the hall. Everyone stared for a moment, jaws agape, but the general quickly regained his composure. "Follow it through the video files," he ordered, "and keep all of the videos at 3 times the normal speed until we catch up to the present time." Private Card set all the video files to synchronize their timestamps, then sped them up and started jumping from file to file following the figure. A little shiver went down the general's spine as he saw himself wiping the sleep from his eyes as he blearily passed through a hallway that 93 passed through only moments later. Clearing his throat, he said, "Well, luckily, it looks as if 93 has no idea where it's going. That area is a dead end. It's basically a storage closet for failed experiments. Send a platoon down the hallway. We'll corner it." "Is that safe, sir?" Card asked, as Private Boslow relayed the orders and the others left for their posts. "Yeah," the general replied. 93 has no weapon functions. It was basically a prototype made to test out the main systems. "There!" He grabbed the radio and clicked the button. "Room 126. He could already see the troops entering the frame and gathering around the door. They were almost caught up already, so they switched over to the real-time feed from the camera inside of the room. Troops poured in through the door. They could see a number of boxes around the edge of the room, and in the center, a large structure that appeared to be made out of thin arches of tanned stone. It looked like the intersecting areas of 3 circles, or a 3-petaled flower with a triangle that bowed outwards at its center. It balanced perfectly upright on the edges of 2 of those petals, in a seemingly impossible manner. Mysterious runes were traced around all of its edges. "What is that thing?" Card asked, staring at the device in wonder, as the troops began turning over crates and opening up boxes. "Oh," General McDowell replied, "something that was confiscated from that old cult that the Supreme Council has been trying to eliminate. The Distians? The Crestons? Christians?" Card guessed. "Yeah, that's the one," McDowell confirmed. "They called it the Trinity Gate." The general let out a sigh. "Crime and Netley! Where could it be hiding?" "Rewind it. Let's see what 93 was up to before our boys entered." Card hit a button, taking the video back 2 minutes before the platoon entered. "What the?" General McDowell stared at the screen, lost for words. On the screen, 93 entered the room, walked right up to the Trinity Gate, and suddenly the space in the middle of the gate was no longer empty. Something sprang into existence from its center. It was circular and looked like an immensely deep pool of water standing on end, which was faintly lit from within. However, the shapes and colors reflected in its depths were not from the room in which it stood. From the angle at which they saw it, they could see that it had no depth, at least not from the outside. It looked as if it would seemingly disappear if you were to look at it from the side. The pool grew until it touched the edges of the inner triangle. The runes glowed white, and moments before the troops burst in through the door, 93 stepped into the pool, which instantly disappeared, and 93 along with it. McDowell slammed his fist down on the desk beside Card. It worked the Trinity Gate, but how? What happened? Card asked, utterly mystified. The Christians believe in a creator entity, a being that made all things and who exists on a higher plane of reality, the general explained. On that plane of reality, things are connected in unexpected ways, and it is said that the Trinity Gate can use those connections to make what they call paths. We tried to make it work for years, but we couldn't find an interface. There are no openings, no moving parts, and it doesn't seem to respond to radiation or magnetic fields. We eventually just gave it up as a myth. But, his voice trailed off as he became lost in thought. What do you mean, paths? Card asked, still mystified. It's like a portal, General McDowell replied, his tail twitching pensively. A portal to other worlds. Thomas sat in the front pew, his dark brown hair nearly obscuring his face as he bent deep in prayer. The little run-down church was empty except for him and God. That was for the best, he thought. He wouldn't want anyone else to be around while he was so full of doubt. This was his first time at this church, but he thought that he liked it here. It was small, and probably not very busy. The door was left open for most of the day, and most of all, it didn't remind him of his wife and daughter. He doubted that he would ever be able to look at the altar of his old church without seeing their caskets lying there. A tear rolled down his face, dripping onto his tan, weathered hand, as a few words of his prayer slipped from his lips. Why, Lord? Hello, a voice from behind him said, giving him a slight jolt. He quickly wiped the tears away from his light brown eyes and turned around to see a pale, teenage girl with waist-length platinum blonde hair and pale blue eyes standing there staring at him, wearing cast-offs that looked as if they had been pulled from a dumpster. Hi. Can I help you? Thomas asked apprehensively. Yes, she replied in a somewhat flat and somehow innocent voice. That is what I was told. Oh, you must be looking for the preacher, Thomas said, getting up to lead her to his office. Is he wearing a blue coat too? She asked in a slightly confused but curious voice. What? I was told that the man in the front pew wearing a blue coat could help me, she replied in the same innocently flat voice. Who are you? I do not understand, she said, strangely confused by the simple question. She had an odd accent. Could she be a foreigner? Somewhat more slowly, Thomas asked. Your name, what are you called? Finally, seeming to understand, the girl replied, I am number 93. 93? Thomas had thought that the girl had understood this time, but that wasn't even close. No, I mean, he held out his hand. I am Thomas Jones, and you are? The girl held out her hand as if it were some kind of salute, and began to reply. In exasperation, Thomas took her hand and began to shake it as she said, I am Humanoid Infiltration and Neutralization Unit, Experiment number 93. Thomas let go of the girl's hand and stood there perplexed. He was beginning to strongly suspect that this girl suffered from some kind of mental illness. That would certainly explain the clothes and the odd behavior and declarations. Should he call the police? No, she didn't look dangerous. However, he couldn't just leave her on the streets. It would be a pain, but Thomas decided that he would take her into the hospital. They could take a look at her and get in touch with Child Protective Services. But how could he get her to go along? He thought for a moment, then said, Sure, I can help you. Come with me, and I'll take you someplace where I can get you help. Okay, the girl replied, and followed Thomas out the door. He felt bad about tricking her, but if it was this easy to trick her, it was a really good thing that he came across her before someone less benevolent did. Besides, he wasn't lying, he really was getting her help. They got in his car and he put on his belt. 93 watched him and then put hers on with almost exactly the same movement. Thomas turned the key. The engine sputtered and then died. After 2 more tries, he let out a sigh and put his head against the steering wheel. This old thing was on its last legs, but he couldn't afford to replace it yet. After all, he had spent most of their money on the one that had. No, he didn't want to think about it. With a sigh, he said, I'd better get out and see what's... but stopped abruptly when he saw something move inside the girl's tattered, filthy old shirt. He jumped back as a snake suddenly sprang at him.
No, wait, not a snake. It had no eyes or mouth. It was pale and thin, with a large rounded spear-shaped tip, a flat underside, and a smooth ridge along the top. The tip of the thing quickly disappeared behind the steering wheel. Thomas's heart was racing as he worked up the courage to peer around the wheel. When it came into view, he saw that the tip had become silvery and melted into the crack between the dashboard and steering column. Thomas leaned back as the girl leaned towards him. She turned the key in the ignition, and the car started nearly as if it were new. The snake-like thing pulled back into view. The girl pulled up her shirt a short ways, and it began to wrap itself around her stomach as she said, "I have repaired your..." She paused for a moment, as if searching for the right word. "Van." Ignoring the fact that she just called his car a van, Thomas sputtered out, What is that thing?" The thing unwrapped itself and curled around in front of her, looking for all the world like a dog sitting at attention in front of its master. She pointed at it with a quizzical look on her face. "My tail?" Then, as if suddenly understanding something, she said, "I understand. Tails cannot normally do that, correct? I know that my tail can do things that my designer's tails could not." When she pulled up her shirt to hide it, he had been able to see clearly where it joined her spine. It definitely was a tail, which he supposed made sense for a lab experiment. But your designers had tails as well? Thomas asked, just barely managing to hold back the urges to laugh, cry, and possibly pass out. It seemed as if a thought struck her, and with a perplexed look, she asked, "Do people not have tails here?" "Not usually," Thomas replied, seriously on the verge of hysterical laughter. "I am sorry?" Her face was once more expressionless. "I had thought it was usual to put clothing on one's tail here, so I did so. It would look as if that was not necessary?" No, I think covering it was a good call. You should continue to do that. Or you'll end up as a lab specimen again," he thought to himself. 93 looked as if she was thinking something over. "Has the device brought me farther than I supposed? Am I no longer on the planet Arthali?" No, you're not," Thomas said, actually starting to laugh now at the absurdity of it all. Suddenly it hit him. Thomas knew what was going on. He reached down and pinched his thigh hard. "Ouch! That hurt!" Okay, so Thomas still had absolutely no idea what was going on. Thinking on it carefully, while 93 watched him expectantly, Thomas narrowed it down to two options. Either it had finally snapped, or there was a teenage alien lab experiment sitting in the passenger seat of his car. Either way, there was only one man that he trusted to help him.